What if I told you that charging interest on a loan was once considered as morally reprehensible as murder? That for centuries, the Catholic Church threatened eternal damnation, not purgatory, not a slap on the wrist, eternal torment for anyone who profited from lending money? And yet somehow, in the middle of this religious prohibition, one family built the largest bank in Europe, financed popes and kings, and invented nearly every tool modern banking still uses today. How did they do it without losing their souls or their heads? The answer lies in 15th century Florence, and it changes everything you think you know about where modern finance actually comes from. Welcome to the Ledger Chronicle, where the vault of history unlocks the secrets of money and power. Let's start with the problem. In medieval Europe, usury, lending money at interest, was a mortal sin. And I don't mean a minor theological quibble. The church declared that usurers could not receive Christian burial. Dante placed them in the seventh circle of hell, right alongside murderers and blasphemers. Kings and popes issued edicts against the practice. Entire communities shunned anyone suspected of charging interest. But here's the contradiction. Society needed credit to function. Merchants needed loans to buy inventory. Kings needed loans to wage wars. Trade needed financing to flow across borders. The entire economy depended on something the church had declared a pathway to eternal damnation. So here's the question. How do you build a banking empire when your core business model damns your soul? This is where the Medici enter the story. In 1397, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici moved his small banking operation from Rome to Florence. The timing was perfect. The great Florentine banks of the previous century, the Bardi, the Peruzzi, the Acciaioli, had collapsed after lending recklessly to English kings who never paid them back. The vacuum was waiting. Giovanni filled it. But Giovanni wasn't just ambitious, he was clever. And he solved the usury problem with an elegant piece of financial engineering called the bill of exchange. Here's what actually happened. A merchant in Florence needs capital. He visits the Medici Bank and receives 1,000 florins. In return, he writes a document, a cambiale, promising to repay the equivalent in English pounds through the Medici's London branch in exactly 90 days. The exchange rate in Florence might be 40 pence to the florin. Now here's where the magic happens. The Medici agents in London find another merchant wanting to send money back to Florence. They offer him a different rate, say 36 pence to the florin. When both transactions complete, the bank pockets the difference. Roughly 10% profit, sometimes more. But here's the genius. No interest was ever charged. On paper, this was just currency exchange. The church couldn't condemn foreign exchange trading. That would shut down international commerce entirely. The fact that these transactions consistently generated double-digit returns? A happy coincidence of market fluctuations. It was a legal fiction. Everyone knew what was really happening. But it was a fiction that worked. The Medici got rich. The church got plausible deniability. And international trade got the credit it needed to flourish. This is where the story changes. Because once the Medici solved the usury problem, they were free to innovate in ways no one had before. Consider double-entry bookkeeping. The Medici didn't invent it. The technique existed before them. But they transformed it from an obscure accounting method into the foundation of modern financial management. The principle is simple. Every transaction gets recorded twice. Once as a debit, once as a credit. Assets must always equal liabilities plus equity. Why does this matter? Because it gave the Medici something revolutionary: clarity. They could see in real time exactly where their money was, who owed them, what they owed others, whether the books balanced, and if they didn't, something was wrong. This sounds basic now, it wasn't then. Previous banking houses operated in a fog of incomplete records and approximations. They guessed at their positions. They discovered problems only after disaster struck. The Medici operated with precision. That precision allowed them to expand across an entire continent, while their competitors stumbled in the dark. Today, every business on earth uses double-entry bookkeeping. Every accountant, every auditor, every piece of financial software. When we talk about balancing the books, we're speaking a language the Medici standardized 5 centuries ago. But here's where it gets interesting. How do you manage a bank with branches in Florence, Venice, Rome, Geneva, Bruges, London, and Barcelona? In an age when a message takes weeks to travel, when you can't pick up a phone or send an email, when you might not hear about a crisis until it's already destroyed you? The Medici's answer was the holding company. Each branch operated as a legally separate partnership. The Florence headquarters owned the largest stake, but local managers were also partners with their own money at risk. This structure accomplished 3 things at once. First, it contained damage. If the London branch failed, and it nearly did when English monarchs defaulted on loans, the collapse wouldn't automatically destroy everything else. The branch could be legally severed. The parent company survived. Second, it aligned incentives. Branch managers weren't salaried employees who could afford to be careless. They were partners whose personal wealth rose and fell with their decisions. That made them careful, motivated, personally invested in every loan they approved. Third, it enabled local expertise. The manager in Bruges understood Flemish wool markets. The manager in Rome understood papal politics. Each branch could respond to local conditions while the center maintained coordination. This is the structure multinational corporations use today. When a company establishes subsidiaries in different countries, each with local leadership but central oversight, they're following a playbook written in Renaissance Florence. Now fast forward to 1420. The Medici secure the most valuable account in Christendom, the papacy itself. They become the depositor of the apostolic chamber, essentially the Pope's banker. Think about what that means. Church revenues flow from every corner of Europe, tithes from England, indulgences from Germany, taxes from Spain. All of it, passes through Medici hands. This relationship transformed everything. It provided massive, stable cash flows that didn't depend on the whims of any single monarch. It gave the Medici political leverage across the entire continent, and it made them indispensable. You don't fire the banker who manages your money when he knows where every florin came from. When Giovanni's son Cosimo took over in 1429, he built on this foundation to make the Medici the wealthiest family in Europe. Pope Pius II reportedly observed that Cosimo was king in everything but name. And he wasn't wrong. The Medici didn't just serve power. They became it. They financed Brunelleschi's dome. They backed Botticelli. They supported Michelangelo. They funded the Renaissance itself. Not out of pure love for art, but because patronage was power. Every masterpiece was a statement. Every cathedral was a monument to Medici influence. So what does this mean for us? The Medici Bank collapsed in 1494, nearly a century after Giovanni founded it. Done in by bad loans to reckless monarchs and family members more interested in art and politics than accounting. The later Medici stopped paying attention to the books. They trusted the wrong managers. They lent to kings who had no intention of paying them back. But by then, their innovations had spread throughout Europe. When you write a check, you're using an instrument descended from Medici, letters of credit. When accountants balance debits against credits, they're using methods the Medici perfected. When corporations establish international subsidiaries with local management, they're employing structures the Medici invented. When banks profit from currency exchange, they're walking paths the Medici blazed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Medici didn't reform the prohibition against usury. They didn't challenge it morally or philosophically. They didn't argue that interest was actually ethical or economically necessary. They simply built elaborate workarounds that let them profit while maintaining plausible deniability. The church got to keep its doctrine. The Medici got their wealth. Everyone pretended the contradiction didn't exist. And that pattern, the gap between what financial systems officially claim to do and what they actually do, never went away. It just got more sophisticated. Think about it. Modern banks don't call it interest on your savings account. They call it yield. Complex derivatives aren't called bets. They're called hedging instruments. When regulations tighten, financial engineers don't stop seeking profit. They find new structures that technically comply while achieving the same ends. The Medici would recognize this game instantly. They invented it. The next time someone tells you that modern finance is built on rational principles and transparent rules, remember the Medici. Remember that the entire system began with a family that found a loophole around sin, scaled it across a continent, and called it banking. We inherited their tools, we inherited their structures, we inherited their genius for making money move across borders. Maybe we also inherited their talent for looking away from contradictions we'd rather not examine too closely. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.